Please welcome to the stage Jeff Daly, Managing Director, Head of Australian Structured Finance Office, MUFG Bank, sponsor of the 2019 Annual Infrastructure Oration.
Good evening. Tonight's orator will discuss how small-scale infrastructure can make a significant difference to communities in developing countries. She operates in a very different space to many of us in this room. But I think there are some similarities when I look across the infrastructure that MUFG has supported over the last 12 months that brings benefits to the communities in which we operate. We were the financial advisor and one of the lead banks for the only social infrastructure PPP to close across Oceania in 2018, the Waikeria project in New Zealand, which included a mental health facility. We were advisor for our first major social housing deal based upon payments from the NDIS for our client Home for Life, providing accommodation for people with disabilities in New South Wales. And in the field of sustainability, MUFG has taken 3 wind farm projects to the Japanese samurai market, raising over $500 million of long tenor financing. We're the advisor and lead bank for the Tailem Bend Solar Farm and the Dondunnel Wind Farm as well. We provided finance for student accommodation facilities at ANU to further higher education for domestic and international students. And most recently, we're the financial advisor and lead bank for Momentum Trains, delivering new trains to enhance the connectivity of regional areas to Sydney. And this last project is the sort of the large infrastructure version of connecting communities. And our orator tonight will talk about infrastructure at the other end of the scale. IPA's new chairman, Sir Rod Eddington, has a favourite saying that many of you may have heard. I actually Googled it today and I found lots and lots of hits, all attributed to him. It's a saying about poorly planned, usually politically motivated infrastructure, that building bridges over puddles and roads to nowhere saddles the community with debts to be paid by future generations. And just this week in my local electorate, we have a Labor state government promising to raise the railway at the Toorak Road level crossing, and a coalition federal government promising to lower the same railway a few hundred metres along the line of the Glenfrey Road level crossing. If you combine the two proposals, you would now create the first suburban roller coaster. But of course, you can't combine the two proposals. They're completely incompatible and they are not the result of good infrastructure planning. So instead, we have infrastructure being used as a political football. But this is a topic we've heard many times from our speakers at this IPA dinner, and tonight we will hear something completely different. About the really positive outcomes that even very simple infrastructure can bring in developing countries. How planners, engineers and contractors, and even infrastructure financiers can make a difference. Our speaker tonight, Avery Bang, is the CEO of Bridges to Prosperity. She is an alumni of the University of Iowa and the University of Colorado at Boulder and received an honorary doctorate degree from Clarkston University. She completed an MBA at said Business School at the University of Oxford, where she was also the Managing Director of the Oxford Seed Fund. And since then, she has dedicated her working life to Bridges for Prosperity. Please welcome her to the podium to tell us more about this amazing initiative.
Good evening. Jeff, thank you so much for the generous offer. Adrian, to the entire team of IPA, it's really a deep pleasure to have the opportunity to share this evening with you guys. And I know I'm right between you and your main, so I'm going to try to keep this nice and punchy and be as interesting as possible. I am also extremely jet lagged, so if I start to fall over, any one of you is allowed to come up here and kick me in the shins. Just watch the teeth. So we'll go ahead and get that. Oh, I can't see it up here, my friends. I'm sorry about that. If you guys could go live on that, that would be really helpful. So I'm Avery Bang, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the other end of the infrastructure spectrum. As Jeff mentioned, I think when you start to imagine a room full of people who already understand the importance of the built environment and how to connect people and how important that is for an economy, this is my favorite group of folks. You guys are my new best friends because I don't have to explain and start at the well, did you know? But did you know? So imagine you walk everywhere. Your children walk to school. You're probably a farmer, and you're walking to the market. You're walking to get your seeds and your fertilizer. You're walking when you need to go see healthcare, whether it's you or your partner or your children. And imagine the only way to get to that place where you need to go between Gondar in Ethiopia and Gojam is to find 6 of your best friends and have them hold tight on either side of the river, and to hope that coming across was worth the journey. For over 10,000 people in this particular region of Ethiopia over the Blue Nile, this was their reality. And this is the reality, unfortunately, for many, many people around the world. And that basic infrastructure that so many people in society just take for granted is anything but taken for granted in these communities. So imagine if your journey for your little girl going to school during the dry season was over a log, and during the rainy season was at home. Well, what we found is something so simple as last mile pedestrian, motorcycle, bicycle infrastructure seems so simple to most of us, right? There's a lot more complicated infrastructure we could put in and have much more of a sex appeal, if you want to think of it this way. But something so simple as a $100,000 or less last mile bridge can be entirely transformative, not only for an individual, for someone going to school, for someone seeking healthcare, but for entire communities. And as an organization, we found that if you can start to invest in this infrastructure, not think about it just technically, but also about how do you finance rural infrastructure, whether it's in rural Rwanda or Bolivia or anywhere in between, this kind of work is not technically challenging in its own right. It's how do you get the political will and the capital moving in order to make these last mile connections possible. So by this point, I usually get like, who the heck is this kid standing up in front of me at the dinner table? So I thought I'd do a little introduction. This is dating myself a little bit, but had I had red hair, I like to think that I would have been selected by Lego to be in this particular ad in the early 1980s, but I really missed the boat. So I instead just decided I would play with Legos and maybe one day fulfill my real full potential to be on the poster child of Lego. And I'm still waiting. So if any of you guys know anyone at Lego, I'm still a big fan. Anyone else? Are we Legos people on this side of the pond? Brilliant. So I really got my start thinking about how to work in the built environment, but ultimately decided to go to uni to play football. And I think for many of us, we're trying to find really our road to Rome. And for me, it was, I'm going to figure out what it is that I'm most excited about and what can I do in a team environment. And for me, that was taking a scholarship to play college soccer. Kind of left those Legos in the background, if you will. But there's something missing about being a student athlete, I think, especially in the ripe age of 20 and you're trying to figure out, well, I'm sure as heck not going to play professionally. I'm not that good. So what's next? Where do I put all of this attention and all of this passion? And what's going to be my sense of purpose after I finish my uni degree? So I did what I think every rational 20-year-old should do. I bought a one-way plane ticket to a place at that time I could hardly find on a map. Obviously, coming from middle America, Fiji is quite a bit further, and my map is pretty poor, so apologies for if we have any Fijians in the room for overshooting by a good solid few miles. But when I was looking at what could I do to navigate this passion and this enthusiasm for doing something big in the world, I'm a bit of a perpetual optimist, so if you couldn't tell, I could be excited about a lot of things. I could be, you name it. Legos is still at the core, but all sorts of interesting things. And going somewhere to really reevaluate what my sense of purpose in life and maybe where that career was going to go felt really important. And what I think I kind of expected was going to be, beaches and what one might imagine you see on all the glamorous brochures. But what I found when I was living in Fiji was a stark difference. And from the people that I've met here tonight and at the advisory board this afternoon, my understanding is a lot of people here have actually spent quite a bit of time in many, many remote places around the world, including here in the South Pacific. And the reality for people who live entirely in a walking world is a very different one, and many of whom live not so far from here. So in Fiji, what I found was, as I was volunteering for the essentially a healthcare organization, and we're doing good work and trying to get to where we wanted to go, to be able to help women with early breast cancer detection, what we found is you leave in the morning, and you didn't know if you're going to be able to reach that community tonight or this afternoon. So the difference between being able to work with that community or not was entirely based on the height of a river, and also on a little bit of an ambition to be able to cross some pretty sketchy things when the water was low. And I think what was interesting is at that time I thought it was a fairly finite issue. You know, maybe my worldview was quite small. But what I've spent the last 13 years really obsessed about is understanding that the root cause of poverty for so many people is actually the lack of access. There's over 1 billion people. So that's 1 in 7 people in the world live entirely in a walking existence and are not able to get to where they need to go. You kind of get your arms around that. The Venn diagram of people who have water poverty, education poverty, poor health outcomes, often are also the people that are not able to commercially participate in their local economies. So as an organization, we have now served over 1 million people with 300 bridges across 21 countries. And I'm really, really proud to tell you guys a little bit more about what we do. But by this time, I was thinking you all might need a little bit of a, so tell me more, Avery, but more dance and less talk. So hopefully this will be punchy. Does that give you guys a sense of scale? I always get a little bit of a question. Okay. Thank you. So I think as an organization, what we're really proud of is we start to think about what's your impact. And 1 million people is kind of a big number, kind of a small number. Depends how you want to cross-section it. For your projects, that's quite small. But imagine people who live entirely in a walking world in the rural context. That's a lot of individuals at any given day are now actively participating in their local economies. We've built over 10 linear miles of bridge, up to 2 football fields in length. We kind of have a sweet spot in technically challenging but also high impact projects. And I often get asked, especially in a room of well above average uneducated folks and people who already understand infrastructure. It's like, well, Avery, why do you do footbridges? You should get into the more the vehicular access and really help to do all sorts of infrastructure. True. There's a huge need for all types of infrastructure, particularly in the remote areas of emerging frontier markets. But footbridges, guys, are really low cost, 30-year lifespan assets that can be built really efficiently and serve the predominant method of transport